there is a powerful lobby that goes to great lengths to make sure that policymakers in those Western countries are not terribly critical of Israel and basically go along with what Israel is doing. It's absolutely horrible what's happening now. And again, I think the situation is just going to continue.
So recently, John Mearsheimer went on Daniel Davis's podcast to expose the horrors of Israel's plan for Gaza occupation, whether he thinks there's any roadblocks to this, any pushback, and how this is going to affect American politics and the shifting sensibilities of Americans away from Israel. So let's get his take on that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Well, the key to understanding what's going on in Gaza is that the Israelis' principal goal here is to ethnically cleanse Gaza. It's to drive the Palestinians out. And to do that, what they want to do is make Gaza unlivable. And at the same time, find some countries or a country that will take in those 2.3 or 2.2 million Palestinians who now occupy Gaza. And what they're interested in doing is driving the Palestinians from the northern part of Gaza, which is where Gaza City is, into an enclave in the south, concentrating them, and then eventually moving them out of Gaza. The problem that the Israelis face is that they can't find a country or countries that will take the Palestinians. So the Palestinians remain in Gaza. And the Israeli solution for dealing with this problem involves the continuous killing of Palestinians. This is why the genocide continues and will continue. The Israelis are not interested in some sort of meaningful peace settlement with or without Hamas. They don't want the Palestinians in Gaza. They want the Palestinians out of Gaza. And by the way, they want the Palestinians out of the West Bank. They want to ethnically cleanse Greater Israel. And it's not politically correct to say that in the mainstream media in the West. And we play all these games where we say that Israel's principal goal is to neutralize Hamas, get the hostages back. Yes, they want to do those two things, but the principal overriding goal is to ethnically cleanse.
Yeah, it's harder and harder to refute this. They've reduced 400 aid stations to 4. They're having a starvation campaign. He's right that most of the Palestinians have been driven into southern Gaza. And meanwhile, we're just supposed to look the other way and say Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel is just minding its own business, and it's not enough for the Israeli government to displace these Palestinians in 1947 and 1948 from their homes, kicking them out, taking their property. They have to cleanse them from Gaza now, and he's right. They haven't exactly hidden this. If you follow Israeli media and Israeli interviews that are in Hebrew, you can hear people like Katz and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, in addition to Netanyahu, talking about this stuff. They do want to ethnically cleanse, and part of it is to concentrate the Palestinians in an area, overtake Gaza, which they will do, and then blame it on Hamas. And guess what? If you don't want Hamas to be sustained, Netanyahu should come forward and apologize for funding Hamas over the course of about a decade from 2012 onward, when he, admits and brags about in a video that we control the height of the flames, and, talking about how, like the Godfather, keep your enemies close, all this nonsense, and his funding of Hamas through Qatar, which is widely known about and published in mainstream accounts even.
But they can't cleanse until they can figure out a way to get rid of the Palestinians. It's very important to understand that. So the Palestinians are there, and they are continuing, the Israelis, to try to make the place more and more unlivable, giving the West, giving the Palestinians, and giving some countries in the Arab and Islamic world an incentive to move to transfer. But that involves the genocide. So the genocide will continue to go on.
Yeah, it gets harder and harder to deny. Israel Katz talks about how the ruins where Rafah once stood, I think the second biggest city in Gaza, will now be a concentration zone. And it doesn't escape noticing that he means a concentration camp. Ehud Olmert has blasted it as such, so has Yair Golan. This is just within the scope of Israeli politics. They want to relocate the few Palestinians that make it through these hardships and these murders into that place. It's horrific, and you just can't deny it any longer.
And now I've read some reports just earlier today that on the southern part here, just south of Rafah, where there is the gate here, that many in the Israeli government continue to put pressure on Egypt to open these gates and say that there's actually it's the Egyptians' fault as to why all these people are stacking up around here about what was Rafah. I don't know if you can even call it a town anymore, but some of these areas down here, because they're saying, hey, just open the gates, through the Philadelphia corridor, and then there'll be people that can live without being fear of anything. What do you make of those claims? And will Egypt ever actually open that gate?
Well, I think what you're talking about dovetails perfectly with what I was saying. The Egyptians will not open those gates. The Egyptians will go to enormous lengths to make sure those gates remain closed, because the Egyptians don't want 2+ million Palestinians flowing into Egypt. They have made that unequivocally clear. The Israelis, of course, are relentless, and they are pushing and pushing and pushing.
Yeah, and this is despite the fact that the U.S. gives Egypt something like $1.3 to $1.5 billion a year in foreign aid to Trump. If he wanted to, help the beleaguered Palestinians, he could apply pressure to Egypt to say, hey, let these Palestinians through, take some of them as refugees, or we're cutting the cord on your support. But the U.S. just pays off Egyptian government like the Israeli government just so it won't go to war with Israel. But there's no contingencies, there's no stipulations. You would think that Trump could apply pressure not only to Netanyahu, but also to Egypt to settle this conflict. He won't, and he won't because he's owned by the Israel lobby and all of its demands, AIPAC included. He's not unique in that respect. Other U.S. presidents have been befallen by being partial to the Israel first mentality, but that is the truth.
And the Egyptians are fully aware of that, and they're going to great lengths to resist the Israelis. And of course, the Israelis, in typical fashion, say it's not their fault. It's the Egyptians' fault. But it's not the Egyptians' fault. This genocide is a result of Israeli policy.
Yeah, all this is ramifications of Israel's policy in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing campaign, the genocide. And that is a ramification of U.S. bankrolling this and not applying pressure against Netanyahu. The U.S. empire builders have a scheme to dominate the Middle East, and the Greater Israel Project is part of it. That's the idea that Israel will expand its borders beyond what it has. That's why they're carving out West Bank settlements in part of Lebanon and Syria, and why it wants to destabilize Iran too. That's exactly what's going on.
Until they can drive all the Palestinians out, they will continue to inflict horrific punishment on the Palestinians.
So let me ask you a question that now moving to your international theorist hat on. You certainly are well aware of all the things that went into the apartheid government in South Africa and how it was dominant for many, many decades before finally external pressure began to change that dynamic there. And then they ended up seeing the changes. Do you see any potential replay of that in regards to global pressure on the government of Israel, or is this just a completely different animal?
Well, Israel benefits greatly from the fact that in almost every Western country, there is a powerful lobby that goes to great lengths to make sure that policymakers in those Western countries are not terribly critical of Israel and basically go along with what Israel is doing. And you certainly see this in the United States with both the Biden administration and the Trump administration. So I think a lot of Israelis think that they can get away with their barbaric behavior because the lobby has their back, which is another way of saying Western countries have their back.
Yeah, this is true in Europe too. It's called Elnet. In Australia too, it's called AIJAC, AIJAC. This is a global phenomenon to pressure Western governments to support Israel at all costs. They have their talons in the United States. They certainly do in Europe and other places as well.
But the whole question of where this all leads is a different matter. The fact is that given the internet and given the fact that this genocide has taken place in ways that make it possible for a vast number of people around the world to see what is going on. And furthermore, given the fact that you have shows like this show and countless other shows of this sort that not only expose what the Israelis are doing, but are critical of the Israelis, Israel has ended up with its reputation being badly and permanently stained.
Good. Stain it more, tarnish it more. And he's exactly right. It's because of the rise of the new media that you're actually getting dissenting voices criticizing Israel for the first time. All of our information doesn't flow through and is monopolized by the Ted Koppels and Dan Rathers of the world. And that's a good thing. We now have more than 3 choices in 3 newspapers, and that's why you're seeing people turn away from this madness, because you just can't watch this stuff with being impartial for so long. If you follow this and care about this, care about where American money is going, while we have so much debt and inflation in our own country, but America first and Ukraine first seems to be the priority, and American politicians prioritize the borders of Ukraine and Israel over our own borders. They think Israel and Ukraine's borders are sacrosanct and pay no heed to the United States.
This is, from a public relations point of view, a disaster for Israel. Furthermore, all of this kind of barbaric behavior inside Israel is going to have consequences on the body politic inside of Israel. I think a lot of secular, more moderate Israeli Jews are going to leave the country. I think the country is going to become more right-wing, if that's possible, with the passage of time. And I think that it will be a country that is in real trouble. Its sense of itself will be badly undermined.
Yeah, I got to agree with the whole world opinion turning against Israel, and you even have prominent Israeli politicians like Yair Golan and Ehud Olmert saying, Olmert in his case in a May article at Haaretz saying he can no longer defend Israel's atrocities in Gaza. He can't even defend them from charges of genocide. He didn't say genocide specifically, but he said it's an illegitimate and cruel campaign against the poor people in Gaza. That's exactly what's going on. You do have some distance from Israel taking these positions. It's not getting that much publicity in the United States. As to whether Mearsheimer's point being that some of those people that are, attracted to that kind of message will flee Israel, I don't know, but I don't see how it's possible that this government becomes more right-wing. But hey, I guess we'll have to see.
And people all around the world will look on Israel in, I think, very negative ways, in ways that has not been the case in the past. And if you look at public opinion polls, by the way, in the United States, it's quite clear that young Americans, including young Jews, have very critical views of Israel, much more so than older Americans and older Jews. And of course, those older Americans and older Jews are eventually going to die, and you're going to have more and more younger people who are going to be critical of Israel. So you have to ask yourself, moving forward 20, 30 years, what does Israel look like? Given the fact that it has been unable to solve this problem. The problem is likely to linger. I'm talking about the Palestinian problem, and that they're likely to continue to act in barbaric ways. I mean, what does this mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the best point Mearsheimer's making right now is the shifting sensibilities in America are away from the pro-Israel mentality. It's usually only the demographic of older kind of boomer Republicans that are supportive of it. I know there's exceptions to that. Let me know in the comments if you're an exception to that, by the way. But that is the shifting sensibilities here. And that's why I think the Netanyahus and the right-wing politicians within Israel have to think right now that, hey, they're under the gun of time right now. They have to act to get this greater Israel project done now, because U.S. sensibilities toward Israel Israel are not going to be the same in 10 or 20 or especially 30 years in the future, where the trends aren't going their way right now.
And then when you get inside Israel itself and you look at the demographics, 13% of the population is now ultra-Orthodox. By the year 2035, given birth rates, about 30% of Israel's population will be ultra-Orthodox. Many of those ultra-Orthodox Jews are remarkably hardline, and they're not the sort of people who have close ties with the West, who generate a lot of sympathy in the West. So I think with the passage of time that Israel's image in the West will be badly damaged, and it will make it increasingly difficult for countries in the West or for governments in the West to support Israel the way they have in the past. And again, I think if you look at what happens inside Israel, just put the West aside, you look at what happens inside Israel, it's not a pretty picture. It's absolutely horrible what's happening now. And again, I think the situation is just going to continue because the Israelis have been unable to solve their so-called Palestinian problem.
Yeah, problem, right? The problem that they created by displacing those people in 1947 and 48 to begin with under the UN resolution. That was a grand land and property redistribution project, primarily supported by the British and Americans, I hate to say, to kick those people out of their houses, to just centrally plan a country by saying, hey, we don't care about the fact that, you know, Palestinians own something like, I don't know, it was like 80% of the land, and we're going to create this partition plan with a two-state solution where, well, now the Zionist Jews get 56% of the territory and the Palestinians get 44% of the territory. I would revolt too. Guess what? That created a war and a massive displacement scheme funded and enforced through the U.S. and through, you know, sympathetic Zionist organizations throughout the world to push them into Gaza, push them into the West Bank. And from then on, it's just been constant conflict that the U.S. has been embroiled with. And Mearsheimer is right that public opinion is turning against Israel. That's why they're acting so radically right now in Gaza. That's why they're reducing the aid stations. That's why they're talking about concentration zones. You have Netanyahu flashing the greater Israel map, you know, more and more. This is all out in the open now. This can't be hidden, and more Americans are taking notice. And hey, you know, the thing that really made it clear to me was looking at Turning Point USA and how it responded to people like Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith talking about this. The reception among younger conservatives is not strongly pro-Israel, not even remotely like it used to be. It used to just be, you know, Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan on the right that had the nerve to say, hey, Israel first is America last, and America should mind its own business in the region. It shouldn't have all these bases overseas and empire building schemes and funding wars of choice in the Middle East because of Israel's influence and because of the influence of the neocons that want those wars. That should be discarded. But now there's more and more people waking up, and it's some of the most prominent people. It's people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and, you know, Alex Jones and Dave Smith that you would lump into the right in some way. Dave Smith being a libertarian, I'm a libertarian. But that is a dynamic that is shifting, and that's why you're seeing this behavior expand. I think Mearsheimer is exactly right. I don't know what forces can stop it, but ultimately, I think the Israeli regime might be doomed. It might bring on its own death and demise by turning so much world opinion against it. It might not be sustainable, even from the United States in 10, 20 years. We'll have to see how that pans out. But let me know down below, do you agree with me? Do you agree with John Mearsheimer? What are the barbaric activities that Israel is creating right now? Do you disagree with anything? What is the pathway out of this mess if you're an American that doesn't think you can influence your federal government in this direction? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Daniel Davis too. Really appreciated this interview. It was awesome. Mearsheimer is a genius. We agree on most things. And please consider becoming a member of my YouTube channel. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. I'll tip my hat to you, the Ruger hat here, and I'll thank you. And I'll also give you, in return for that, access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.